So, welcome in Salesforce FXR, and today we are going to talk about the identity flow. My name is Amit Chaudhary. I'm the founder of the Salesforce FXR, and let me hand over to Atul to talk about the identity flow and single sign-on. Hand over to you, Atul.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you for this awesome opportunity. So I'll begin with my introduction and then I'll give you the brief overview about what I'm going to talk about. So I am Atul Rajguru. I'm working as a senior technical architect. I am certified system and application architect. I have done 13 certifications. I am 2x Ranger, community speaker, and I occasionally blog about Salesforce interesting feature that I face challenges with or I found really interesting. On screen, you can see my Twitter and LinkedIn handle. If you face any question or if you have any follow-up question, please feel free to tweet or follow up on uh, any specific question that you may have on Twitter. So today, the agenda that I want to cover is I want to talk about the identity. What is identity? How it helps, and then what is use of it? What challenges it resolve, and the advantages of identity. Then I would like to probably I'll cover the theory part in next 15 minutes approximately, and then I want to showcase three demos that I have prepared using Salesforce as a identity provider, using Salesforce as a service provider, and using social sign-on in Salesforce. Probably this should take us around 45 to 50 minutes, and then we should have 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. If you guys have any questions, feel free to post it on the chat window, and then Amit or Jigar can reconcile them, and then we can take them up at the end of this session. Don't wait for your question to be, at that point, just post it on the chat, and then we will address them at the end. So core concepts of identity. What is identity? Identity, right? So identity is a mechanism by which applications, computer applications can identify individual, right? So if I go to computer and say that I am Atul Rajguru, how system will identify that, right? We need some mechanism. System will not be able to verify the document that I have, or system will not have the general way of identifying person, right? So historically we've been using username and password for identifying individual person, right? But in recent times there are a lot of changes in the identity process where you can unlock your phone with the thumb scanner, or your Facebook account can be opened with your face recognition, or there are high security walls which can be opened by retina scan, right? So this is all about identity, right? The system is identifying that the individual is the one what they are saying that they are, right? Then the next part is authentication and authorization. So if we look at from the bird's view, it looks very similar. Like authentication and authorization looks very similar, but there is a significant difference to it. If we look closer to it, authentication is a process where we are allowing somebody to we are saying we are verifying the identity of the person, right? Authorization is after authentication, which so let's say that you are sort of entering into uh, uh, a corporate office, right? And then they will verify your ID card, and then they will allow you to enter, right? But then they will not allow you to enter all the premises of that corporate, right? So if there is a data center, they will not allow you to enter. So there are only certain people who will be authorized beyond certain point, right? So authorization is a process where where the user is authenticated already, but then we verify that particular resource can be granted to that person or not. So in Salesforce world, we have like object level security, field level security, record level security. All the security measures are majorly talk about the authorization part, like whether are you authorized to use particular resource or not. Authentication is the only login piece, right? So there is this difference that we should understand and should be aware about. Now, single sign-on. So single sign-on, we some of you might already know. Single sign-on is a process where we provide we establish the identity only once and then use it at various places, right? So, for example, if I log in to my corporate network with my AD credentials, then all the applications behind or all the applications who are uh, hooked to the AD uh, can be directly accessed. So I can access my leave management system. I can enter my time management system, project management system, or any other systems who are affiliated with the corporate AD, right? So this is about on-premises systems where our Active Directory is working as an identity provider. It verifies its only job is to verify the identity of a particular person, right? And it's only sort of establishing that identity, and then its job is to establish that trust. And then service provider are the applications which are relying on the identity provider to verify the identity. And then if identity provider says that okay, this person is authenticated, then service provider trusts that person and then provide the resources or provide the service to that particular user, right? So there are different flows. So you might have noticed in the title that we are going to talk mainly about the flows, identity flows, what are different identity flows. So there are two important identity flows, okay? And then they are classified based on who initiate the flow, okay? So if user, there are system where user logs into IDP and then from there it goes to service provider, and we have upcoming slide about that and demo about that where you'll get better clarity. But just for like sake of completeness, there are two types of flow: identity initiated, IDP initiated, where the flow starts when user logs in into IDP system and then goes to service provider. There is second type of SSO flow where user requests directly request to the service provider. Service provider then verifies whether the particular user have is already authenticated with IDP or not, and then depending on that, it redirects to the IDP. And then there is this social sign-on where you can use any social site which supports the OpenID API, which is basically extended version of OAuth 2.0. So any site which supports that can be used in Salesforce as to log in into Salesforce or establish your identity. So you can use LinkedIn, you can use Google, you can use Facebook, you can use JNRAN, you can use Twitter, and there are n number of sites which supports open IDP, and then we can use that, right? So advantages of identity management. So if we do not have identity management system centrally, what happens is every application needs to have their own credential, and then users generally tend to write them down, or to make it easily available, they put it on in a flat text file, or in a sticky note, and then put it on their desktop. So it creates a it creates a security risk. So if we have a IDP system, it can be controlled centrally, and if a particular person leaves the organization, you do not need to go 10 different application and disable that user. You can just switch that off that user from a central IDP, and then that user's access will be terminated immediately at all places. Security we talked about, where it increases security. Uh, with, users do not users just need to remember one username password, and then it works for all the applications, so it increases the security. Policy update, you can update as it is, it's related to centralized control, where suppose if you want to increase a password, increase or decrease password lifetime, you can do that centrally in your IDP system, and then it will reflect immediately at everywhere. So for example, um, you have right now, let's say your password is valid in your organization for um, let's say 45 days, and you want to make it 30 days because there is a new supercomputer which can work a little faster, and then track the particular or generate a particular combination. So in those kind of scenarios, we can update the security policy at the center place, and then it immediately reflects everywhere. Easy to use. Rest of the, you might have noticed this, whenever we bring change in the system, right? Most of time I have noticed that there is a resistance at the user level. People are many times do not want to change because they are acquainted with the existing system, and um, they generally, from a user point of view, it create a disturbance in their day-to-day work life. So if we use single sign-on, my observation is exactly opposite, specifically at this point, where user are delighted to use single sign-on. They do not need to remember and maintain 100 different username and password credentials. So if you enable single sign-on in your or in your company or for your client, they will definitely be happy to use this feature. Work seamlessly for a new application is like, if suppose if you want to create a new mobile application or any other third-party application, custom application, you can use the existing single sign-on framework that you have already created. So it becomes easier to bring in new application in your ecosystem, in your corporate network or corporate application ecosystem, right? So these are some of the important advantages of identity management, right? So um, let's do a quick time check. Okay, we are good on time as of now. So let's dive into first demo. Okay, so I while I was on this slide, I said, probably we'll go through identity provider flows and SP initiated flow in detail. So here is that part. So identity initiated single sign-on works like this. Here is your login screen for the IDP. User logs in into IDP, and then once user log in into IDP, or they get various chiclets are like link or icons where user can click on it and then go to specific service provider. Okay, so once you log in into IDP, you get access to everything. Okay, everything that you are authorized to, right? So once the authentication is done, it verifies what is the authorization, and then based on that, it shows you which application or which service provider you have access to, and then it gives you as an option to click on and then open that specific service provider. Okay, so this is our first demo. So let's see a live how it looks and how it works. So this is one of my DevOps. Okay. Um, okay. So I am logged in into my DevOps and I go to App Launcher. So App Launcher is a standard application, and once I go in App Launcher, I already have a configure various checklets, and then this is the one of which I did specifically for this demo. And once I click on this, notice the URL which changes. So currently I am on domain IDP demo 1 hyphen dev, and the rest of the things are pretty much what you see. So notice the IDP demo 1 part. Right? Once I click on this, um, it goes through the complete SSO flow, and it opens up the another SP org, right? So this is what this flow is doing. So I logged in into IDP org by using my credentials, and once I logged in, once I logged in, I can go to any of the org which I have a permission to, right? So I clicked on my SP org and I am already in my SP org, right? So this is the first demo. So let's take a look at it, how we can set this up, right? So how we can configure the IDP and how we can configure the SP and then establish this trust between these two and achieve this functionality, right? So now to do that, I am logging out of both the org, and I will follow certain steps, and I have already done some of these pieces which are pretty straightforward. So let's go to next slide where we have all this stuff. So set up my domain in both IDP and SP org, right? So let's So I have created a couple of depots and set up the my domain on this org. My domain is very important for working with SSO. So to set up my domain, what we need to do is like we need to go in my domain, set up my domain, and here we need to just provide there are two simple buttons. So it checks, it asks you like what domain you want to configure. I have provided IDP demo 2 here. You can provide any unique string and then verify that that particular domain subdomain is available. Once it is available, you can uh, follow through the standard flow and then deploy that domain to all users. And once it is deployed to all users, it will be available. Everybody from your org can use that domain. So once now our domain is set up, right? So now let's take a look what next we need to do. So domain is set up, go in IDP or identity provider and enable IDP and create set. Okay. So this is IDP or so we need to set up the IDP. So on this org, I have completed this part where I have enabled the identity provider, this org as an identity provider, and I have already selected the certificate. Once you are done with that, we need to uh, go to SP, which is service provider, or I have since like I have tried this. I have tried this few times, so there are quite few username and password that I am sort of juggling between. So it used my existing session, so it did not ask me for username password. That's fine. So on this org also I have set up my domain sp demo2. In this org we need to configure a remote site setting. So remote site setting is basically tells system that this specific URL. If you have done any sort of integration, you might already know that like uh, this specific site is sort of accessible, or you can access this specific site or URL from this org, right? So we need to copy the Salesforce identity URL and provide it here, and let's say now remote site setting is configured. Next thing we need to do is add IDP URL and then single sign-on setting. And click new from a metadata URL and provide the URL from IDP that we have copied, Salesforce identity URL. And click create. So it will automatically pull the details from the URL and it will try to create a single sign-on setting. The only difference or only change that we should do is how this radio button, right? Assertion contains the federation ID from the user object. So user, so we need to map users between IDP and SP so that both the system know that we are talking about this specific user, right? So here we are going to use federation ID. And let's say okay, so all load here. Now, single sign-on setting, new metadata URL ID, create a connected app. So we need to in a IDPR, we need to establish connection for this SP. So anything that is uh, coming from so we any user request which is coming from SP, we need to establish, we need to provide a mechanism in the IDP so that they can uh, authenticate in the IDP. So SSO enable SAML. So this is important. Okay, so entity URL is the URL uh, of your URL that you can get from your single sign-on setting of SP. ACS URL is again you can get from a single sign-on setting SP. Then the subject is the how the both system we talked about, right? How both system will communicate, or how both system will establish the trust. So federation ID um, is the field which we'll use to establish connection between uh, both system users. And for the certificate in this part, certificate we are using um, self-signed certificate. Certificate. So certificate should match in your um, SP and the single sign-on setting, and then the setting that the connected app that we are creating here. Let's click save. We are almost there. So what we have done till now is we have set up the domain, we have created the identity provider, we have set up the identity provider in IDPR, we have created remote site setting, and then we have imported the metadata from the URL and created a single sign-on setting. We have created connected app, right, and provided the important details. Now the only thing remaining here is the how both users will be mapped to each other, right? So in users, so we specified that we will identify or will associate user based on the federation ID. So now let's go in users and edit user, and update the federation ID field. So here I am saying let's demo one. And same thing we'll need to do in SP. Let's save. And to test this whole flow, what we need to do is go in connected app, click manage, and it will show you a linked IDP initiated login. Once we click on this, if everything is right, we should see a login page, but we are not. So let's give our user permission. So I am system administrator, so I'll just add system administrator. Save, go back, and we can try our luck. We can't log in, check for invalid assertion in the SAML assertion validation URL. Okay, check the login history. Okay. So the assertion URL that I specified is most probably wrong. So debugging of single sign-on is one of the important part. So let me go back. This is IDP. This is
So चाय काढी दे.
Atal, can you please go through the debug process or the thinking process of how you are trying to debug the issue now?
Oh yeah, sure. It's little difficult to
I mean, that's fine. Like, just think out loud so that we will also know like what's happened. I mean,
Sure.
what are the steps involved and.
Right. So what error that we see here is we cannot log in, check for an invalid assertion in the SAML validator. So what it is essentially saying is that the assertion is failing because it's most probably because the ACS URL that we have specified is not right. So ACS URL is the URL where we provide the uh, where the system verifies the access control for specific users, right? So that URL is not valid. And let me check the logs. SP initiated SAML. This is not us. Okay. Okay. Let me quickly log into the another org that I have already set up and so the ACS URL is right. Entity ID is, so that is what we have specified. So, and so and entity ID is this. Hmm. Interesting. I'm trying to check for invalid exception.
So, Atul, does that mean like the identity provider is sending an invalid assertion to service provider?
Right.
So, we get the assertion when the user tries to log in. The identity provider validates the user and sends the assertion to service provider, and that XML has some invalid data.
That's right. The piece that I'm trying to figure out is so all this data seems valid. The certificate seems valid. The ACS URL is right. The entity ID is right. And I will log out issuer.
Atul, just a guess. Do we have to enable SAML SAML enabled SSO setting in service provider to work?
I think it is not going to the service provider. This is SP demo. Okay. Let me. I think we did that. One second. I did right. Oh, who was that? Amit? Was that you?
It was Nakul.
Oh, okay. Good catch. And voila, here. So if you notice, we are now into service provider SP demo 2 org, right? So what we did is we just clicked on a link IDP initiated, and then the important step that I was missing out was in the SP org, we need to enable the SAML. We need to make a SAML enable so that it can validate the assertion which is coming from IDP. Nakul, thank you very much for pointing that out. Now that's out of our way. Now let's go move on a little quickly. We have just next 15 minutes. So I'll demo you the So this is the IDP initiated flow, right? So in IDP, we can provide this URL anywhere in the application. Like initially I shown you from the the app launcher, you can go and then click on a particular link, and then it will open up the SP org, right? So this is the IDP initiated flow. So now let's go back to next demo, where we'll see a service provider initiated SSO. So what is service provider initiated SSO? Service provider initiated SSO works like this. User agent send a request to service provider, right? And then service provider knows, or service provider, I mean, there are two cases. Like service provider may directly redirect you to the identity provider, or service provider may give you option for login with specific credential, right? So in a standard, like in a 99 cases scenario, service provider directly redirects you to the specific IDP that you have configured. Identity provider verifies your identity, right? And then return back you the assertion, SAML assertion, and then that assertion we forward again to SP, and then SP verifies that that assertion, and then it logs you into the application, and then you can request a particular resource, and then the request can be granted, right? So we'll see this flow live in action. So what we'll do is, like, we will log out from our so we already have my domain configured on our SPR. On this login, we can we have an option. So now we have configured IDP, or we have established that identity trust between IDP and SP. So we have an option here that says use IDP2 for login or for authentication. Okay, and you can Salesforce give you capability, like you can use either Salesforce the SP login form, or you can use the IDP flow, right? So we'll keep both the option, and we'll see how it looks like. We can configure, the logo, and we can configure the um, any specific items that we want, right? So I'll just choose one logo, maximum size. Okay, let's not change logo then. Maximum size, dimension. Refresh the page. I'll not change the logo. I'll just change the color, and just to save some time. And right frame URL is the side window that we see. I'll just show you. Save, and then log out from the SPR. I have disabled the logout from the IDPR, so I will just enable it so that okay, I'll need to do more further things. So what I will instead do is I'll just copy this URL and open it in incognito window. So you can see the background color here is changed. This is the right frame URL. If you want to specify a specific URL, your corporate news or something, you can do that. And I'll enable the IDP flow. This will authenticate. This will make sure that the authentication option for IDP is available on the login screen. So now if I refresh this login page, we should see IDP as an option to log in. So if I click on this, it will ask me details, or it will take me to the IDP demo 2 site, IDP demo 2 or, and if I provide my IDP login details for this user, right? For this user, so I'm providing my IDP credentials. One of the downside of is you tend to forget the passwords. It is demo 1. and it is asking me for verification code. I'll just quickly open that on my email, on my phone. And 0, 6, 7, 4, 5. And done. So we initiated flow from the service provider, and it went to IDP. It asked the credential of the IDP. IDP verified and then redirect to the SP again. So I think this part is clear. Now let's quickly jump into the last demo, which is a social sign-on. So Salesforce also gives us the capability to use the social sign-on. So I'll just show you the login page. So here on the login page, I can, there was, you in the second demo, we are seeing the Salesforce was the option to log in, where I provided the credentials of IDP. Here we have a number of options like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. We can provide any of these users, any of the social sign-on or social sites which supports OpenID API. So I have a two-factor authentication for my Gmail account. It asked me on my phone, and I just authorize it. Now it should redirect us any minute. Interesting. So I sent the sign-in request from my phone. For some reason, it worked for another 10 times. But yeah, live demo. Try another way. The verification code. Let me see if I can get through with SMS. And that's also for some reason it's not. So let me quickly go to the other window and just open it here, where I have already authenticated my dev work. And let me log out and sign again. So here we have a multiple option. Once I click on the Google link, it asks me for the credentials, and I tell them which account I want to map to, and then it directly takes me into Salesforce. So this is social sign-on feature. To set this up, what we need to do is we need to follow certain simple steps. We need to follow all the steps that we have done in the demo one, which are mainly about the uh, setting up your IDP, setting up your my domain. Okay, and then once we have done that, Sorry, this is okay. We need to log in into Google. We need to specify the. We need to create a connected app. So I will log in into console.google.com. Console. And from console, what we need to do is like we need to create a new project, and under that project we need to create API keys. I will not go through that process to say. Sometime I'll just show you the existing API keys that I have already created. So you need to go in APIs and services, under that credentials, and you need to create new credentials. So just create new credential and select OAuth client and web application. Provide a name and then click create. So this will create a new credential for you. It will give you the client ID and client secret. Then we need to go in Salesforce and so we are through 4 steps. Reputable redirect you are going to specify. So we will go in authentication providers and select new. And here are the 8 out-of-box providers. If we select Google, it automatically takes the majority of your workload. You just need to specify few important details, or say demo 1, and I need to copy the credentials or client ID, client secret from here. Once we have done that, so I have already created another Google consumer key secret, and we'll need to create a registration handler class, and we need to tell system that which user we should run this code as. So we quickly save. And once we have done all this setting, we need to go in my domain and just enable it. My domain. And the way that we enable the login option for IDP on the SP, we can select the new demo 1 as well. And it should ideally just show you the login option on your front screen of application. So I think that is what I wanted to cover till today. So Amit, do we have a time for a question?
Atul, I think we've got quite a few questions.
Okay.
So probably we just want to look up the chat window and answer a few of them.
Okay.
Although we're not left with too much time, but I believe we can still spend like 5 minutes to answer some of the questions.
So have you shortlisted some of the questions, or?
So Atul, if you can, so there is one question which is just to come in from Bharat Kumar, and I think it's there on the chat window. So Bharat is asking if we enable login with Google, how do we manage it for multiple users? That is, how do we get the consumer and the secret for every user?
Okay,
That's
so
one of the questions.
yeah, definitely a very good question, Bharat. So we need to establish this only once for the entire org. Okay, and then what we need to do is the piece probably I skipped due to the time was the registration handler. Okay, so your registration handler that we created while setting up the authentication was it was just a simple link that we clicked and system automatically created that class for us, right? So that class basically handles the mapping between your Google users and Salesforce users. So you need, as a system administrator, you just need to provide the you just need to do the setup only once, and then all the users on the Google which are mapped with Google ID on your users database, right? So we have a user object in Salesforce. On that I have created this custom field Google ID, and then whatever value that so suppose new employee comes in and then he wants to use his social credentials for logging into Salesforce, right? What you can do is you can get his ID. We just need to know his ID, which is sort of public information, and we can map that user's ID on their profile or on their user record, and then this way we just need to do this setup only once, and then whenever new user come in, we just need to sort of update that specific field, or we just need to specify like his username, name, password, not password, but the rest of the details we provide, right? His email, his first name, last name. So same way we can provide the Google ID field, and then once we do that, it will automatically map that specific user uh, to Google, what do you say, Google's ID, right? So once this setup is ready, we can use it for n number of users. We don't need to create n number of connected apps for n number of users. This is one Google org versus one Salesforce org. You can consider it like that. Does that answer your question?
I believe so. So yeah, I think Bharat just acknowledged that. So I believe
perfect.
yes.
Perfect.
There is one more question from Swati. So her question was, usually in a connected app, we use the enable OAuth setting, but for the current demo, I believe we used an enable SAML setting.
Right.
So is there anything specific or any specific reason why you would have ended up using an enable SAML setting?
So there are majorly two types of APIs, right? One is XML based, one is REST based. So SAML is XML based. OAuth or OpenID is REST based. So whenever we use SAML assertion, we need to enable SAML. If we want, so for example, the demo that we did for SP to IDP or Salesforce to Salesforce kind of authentication we did, that was using the SAML. So there we need to enable SAML. If you want to use Google or Facebook, which is using OAuth, then we'll have to use the OAuth setting. So these are two different things, right? So some specific system support SAML, others support OAuth, and there are trend in the market that many new IDPs support both. So it's our choice that what is available to us, and then what we want to choose or what we are comfortable with. Just like the APIs, right? So when we do integration, it's our call whether to use SOAP or whether to use REST.
Okay, and I believe we can just take one last question. So generally on the group, there was one thread which is which kind of came up was, is there a way where I can really identify, or which helps me choose as a solution provider to say that whether we should be using an identity provider based initiated flow, or service provider initiated flow for single
Um,
sign?
So I would say that it really depends on your use case. What kind of experience that you want to provide to your users, how they are using their existing application. So it largely depend on that. So like if you remember the first demo where the nice chiclet was shown, that is a different experience, right? User logs into IDP and then from there he choose which application they want to use. Uh, it
Right.
depends on the nature of work that they are doing, right? Your end users are doing. If they are they don't know like which application they'll use first or which application they would end up using first time. Then probably SP initiated flow would be nice. If they know that if they are like sort of call center agents where they know that the first thing that they need to do is like go and log in into their system, where they'll be able to receive calls. So their like IDP initiated flow would make better user experience. So it's just matter of user experience.
Okay. And last but not the least, if our audience wants to go back and want to get their hands dirty with building out these login flows that you just showcased, is there a good starting point that you can recommend which they can really go back and use?
Trailhead is probably a very repetitive answer that I gave to people, but then I find it really, really useful. All my learnings were, based on that. So I think it is really, really useful to go through the Trailhead modules related to identity and then understand the basic concepts, and go beyond the basics as well. So that
Yep.
is a good starting point, I would suggest.
In fact, one of our members, Asmith, he just posted a URL for a trailhead which could be relevant to what we were talking about today. Guys, if you're interested, just follow that URL. It's trailer.salesforce.com /content/learn/module/identity login. So it's there in the chat window. You guys can just use that in addition to what just Atul said. And with that, I think we've overshot our time. But thank you, Atul. Thank you for such a wonderful session. And thank you, everyone, for joining in today. Of course, you guys are joining in from different time zones, different geographies. It's not a very convenient time for everybody, but thank you for being so patient and being there throughout the session. And we'll keep bringing some amazing sessions ahead. So keep following our page on the Trailblazer community, our YouTube channel. This session is going to be recorded. It's already recorded, in fact, and it's going to be posted on our YouTube channel. So keep following. So keep learning. Stay hungry and stay foolish. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day, and let's see you soon again. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Jigar. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this awesome opportunity. Thanks for your time. Bye.